He didn't move the capital. He reimagined the empire. In 330, he planted Rome's flag on the Bosphorus and called it forever. His city would outlast his dynasty, his religion, his enemies, and every catastrophe history could devise. The eastern shore of a narrow strait became the center of the known world and stayed there for 1,000 years. There is something quietly tragic about being last. He ruled both halves, held the line, made the faith official, and when he died, the thing he governed simply split and never healed. He didn't fail. He finished. And in this story, finishing and failing amount, in the end, to the same thing. He was 9 years old when he became emperor. The walls he built would stand for a millennium, longer than any army, any dynasty, any idea he ever had about himself. A child inherited an empire and gave it the one thing that would protect it long after everyone who knew his name was dead. He fell from a horse at 48, and the walls kept standing without him. He wanted to be the emperor who restored Rome. He nearly was. The law he codified still shapes courtrooms across the world. The church he built still stands. He reconquered North Africa and Italy and filled Constantinople with monuments to his own certainty. And the treasury he emptied to do it nearly finished what the Persians and the plague had started. The comeback took 12 years and consumed everything he had. He destroyed the Persian Empire, recovered the true cross, and rode back into the capital, a conqueror. It was the greatest military reversal in the history of the Roman world. And it meant nothing. Then the Arabs came, and he watched the provinces fall one by one and died, knowing he had won the wrong war. They cut off his nose to stop him. It didn't stop him. He crossed the Black Sea, raised a Bulgar army, and took back everything. Not because the math made sense, but because he refused. He ruled a second time with the fury of a man who had been humiliated in front of the world. The golden nose was not vanity. It was a message. The Arab fleet that arrived in 717 numbered over 1,000 ships. Leo held the walls, deployed Greek fire, and broke them in the Golden Horn. The siege lasted over a year. What survived it was not just a city, but the idea that the city could survive. An idea the empire would need to believe for 7 more centuries. History gave the credit to others. The walls of Constantinople gave it to him. He won 9 campaigns in 30 years and died undefeated on the field. The church despised him for smashing icons, wrote the history that followed, and made sure posterity remembered the name they gave him, not the wars he won. His armies pushed the empire's borders further than any emperor since Justinian. The record survived anyway, buried under the insults of the men who she made a calculation no one before her had made, and followed it without hesitation. Her son lost his throne and his sight. She signed the decrees in a man's name, lived with a man's title, and acted in a man's role. No system existed for what she was, so she bent the system until it fit. She ruled alone, which was the only thing she had ever wanted. He rewrote the law of the empire in 60 volumes. He rewrote its military doctrine in a single manual. The Basilica and the Tactica together reshaped how Byzantium governed and how it fought. He married 4 times, which the church considered a scandal far worse than anything the Bulgarians had done. The wise, they called him, though wisdom, it turns out, is unevenly distributed. A sailor's son who reached the throne by crossing every line between him and it. He protected the poor because he remembered being one, and issued laws the aristocracy spent decades trying to reverse. His sons forgot what he was made of. They put him on an island to die as a monk. He outlasted their ambitions, and the laws he wrote outlasted all of them. Born in the purple, sidelined for decades. He spent the years writing, cataloging the geography of the empire, the protocol of the court, the weight of everything that had been. Without him, centuries of Byzantine knowledge would have died with the men who held it. When he finally ruled alone, he governed like a man who had read every book about it. He had. He slept on stone floors and wore a hair shirt beneath the imperial purple. He drove the Saracens from Syria and Cyprus, and the Arab world named him, roughly, the Pale Death. In 6 years, he doubled the empire's eastern territory, more than any emperor in 3 centuries. On the night of December 11th, 969, he was cruelly murdered in his bed by people he trusted. The irony was complete. He took the throne over a dead man's body and marched his armies to the walls of Jerusalem within 6 years. He was short, flame-haired, and moved through a battle like a man who had nothing to lose. 7 years was all he had. The campaigns left unfinished, the city just out of reach. History offers no points for almost, but it should have made an exception. He ruled for 49 years and never lost a war. He blinded 15,000 prisoners and sent them home in columns, each led by one man left with a single eye. The Bulgarian Tsar, they say, died of shock when he saw them return. When Basil died, Byzantium was larger than it had been in 5 centuries. He left no heir. He had never needed one. Manzikert lasted 1 afternoon. The Seljuk cavalry encircled what remained of the Byzantine center, and by evening, the empire had lost the Anatolian heartland it would never recover. Anatolia was not just territory. It was the recruiting ground, the breadbasket, the body of the empire. The Sultan treated him with respect. His own court blinded and deposed him. He was dead within the year. He inherited an empire in free fall, Anatolia gone, Normans in the west, treasury empty, and spent 37 years rebuilding it with what he had: intelligence, patience, and a letter to Rome. The letter became the First Crusade. The crusade never quite did what he intended. It rarely did what anyone intended. He adapted. He always adapted. His daughter wrote it all down so no one could forget. He had the instincts of a great emperor and the resources of a diminished one. He reached for the Mediterranean anyway, and at Myriokephalon, the mountains closed around his army, and the dream ended in a single pass. The defeat broke something that could not be repaired. He died planning the campaign that would reverse it. There was no reversal. The empire he left behind could not survive his ambition. In 1261, he walked back into Constantinople and relit the fire. 57 years of Latin occupation ended in a morning. He restored the throne, the administration, and the idea that Byzantium still existed, with almost no resources and an enemy on every border. He bought the empire 2 more centuries. The price was the trust of the church, the loyalty of his people, and the approval of a god he spent his life trying to convince. He had 7,000 men. The Ottoman host outside the walls numbered 80,000. He knew the numbers. Every general present knew the numbers. And he stayed. He sent away the ships that could have saved him and walked the walls one last time in the dark before the final assault. On May 29, 1453, he removed his crown and walked toward the breach. His body was never found. The empire that began with a Constantine ended with one.